into going into pre-med will be like. I will say that I think the biggest thing is probably going to be that the science is a little bit more rigorous in the med track. And the main thing to keep in mind is that because the mechanisms and the pharmacology get tested at a more advanced level in the med track, you will want to be paying really close attention to the details. So it's really not an option to kind of be light on the details when you're in that med track. The topic list is also a lot longer, specifically for the pre-med route. If you're planning on taking the MCAT, so just in bullet point format, there's about 110 pages of topics that you have to know for the MCAT. So it is pretty intense on the science details there. So keep that in mind. We have another one that says, what's your biggest tip to me as a high school student? So if you're thinking of becoming a doctor and you're a high school student, there's two routes to keep in mind. One route is the traditional route. That is if you go from your high school into college and you know that you want to apply to medical school after college. And weirdly, that route is actually completely open. If you are interested in like music theory, women's studies, African history, European archaeology, like whatever random major that you are interested in, you can do any of that and still become a doctor because they don't care what your major is. There's a sort of a almost mythical level assumption that there has to be some sort of biology or STEM field involved, and that's not necessarily true. I did not have the traditional pre-med bio degree. I did a math degree with a minor in physics and became a essentially a physics instructor and a teacher, and then actually worked as a mathematician as a Google quant analyst. And I was like way off the beaten path compared to most pre-meds. And then I went back and took prerequisites. So as long as you get the prerequisite courses you need, you can study whatever you want in college. The other route is you can go for the BS to MD program. That's BS as in Bachelor of Science to MD for medical doctor. And those are the combined pipeline programs that are similar to the European path. That's where you apply it to the combined program at the beginning of your college career or the end of your high school career. That is, it can be intensely competitive though. So if you're thinking of doing the combined track, please look into the track that you will apply to before you're any farther along your journey. All right. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, guys. Thank you for the questions. We'll wait for any others to come through here in a second. We're going to kind of try to answer things pretty rapid fire tonight because we're trying to keep it to around a half hour. So any questions that you might have, please do feel free to let me know. Let me check let me check the chat on this side as well and make sure everything is going how it needs to. Let me see if I can figure this out real quick. If you guys have any in the YouTube live as well, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Again, remember guys, if you are looking for general questions about the MCAT, pre-med, or applying to med school, drop those questions here. If you are interested in personal MCAT help, please feel free to drop me a line at mcatboss.com. You can also read more about me and my publications and my career, things like that at mattinmedicine.com. There's also a link for for more information about the MCAT and some testimonials, things like that. I'm one of the most experienced MCAT tutors in America because even though I'm a fourth year med student, I've been teaching the MCAT for almost 10 years. Actually, no, oh my goodness, almost 12 years. And I've seen every way that somebody has done it successfully and every single way that people have done it unsuccessfully. So please do feel free to let me know what questions you have. All right, guys, let me check okay, so we have another question. Omar says, what's a good year to start studying for the MCAT? Very good question. Now, if you could please let me know if you are asking this as a college student or a high school student. I'm going to presume that you are a college student based on the question, just because that's what most people ask. And the answer there is, honestly, it's a little bit sooner than most people do. A lot of people don't study for the MCAT until they're like maybe 6 to 12 weeks out from their date. Please don't wait that long. I strongly recommend getting a subscription to some kind of a MCAT Q Bank about 2 years in advance, so you can just, in a chill pace, start doing MCAT related problems and just knock like 5 or 6 out a day, and it'll feel super low burden to get used to the MCAT. It's never too early to do it. That you also, it's a kind of a sweet spot because you have a chance to do your own prerequisite courses. At least for most people, they'll have most of their prerequisite courses done by then, and I think that's a kind of a I think that's a pretty good place to land it. All right. Thank you guys for sharing the live. Really appreciate it. Share with your, please do, share. Let me see how to adjust this. I do not know how to adjust that. I was trying to adjust something and I think that I froze it. Is it frozen? Can you guys still hear me? Hopefully it is not frozen. All right. Okay. So let me see. Sophomore in college. Great. Yeah. If you're a sophomore, I would say sometime in the next 6 months is not a bad time at all to start studying for the MCAT specifically. What do you recommend for a high school student? Again, the main thing to think about there is you really want to figure out if you're applying to a traditional college route and then applying to med school, because then you just do whatever you want to do for college, right? You study whatever you're interested in and you enjoy the experience. Don't sweat the details on what your major is, and just make sure that you do well in your science classes. Now, if you are thinking of going BS to MD route, please keep in mind that they're getting super competitive because you're applying as a high school student to a combined program, and that is very, very competitive. You want to keep your GPA, especially in sciences, as high as possible. All right. I really struggle with CP, so that would be like chemistry and physics. This is a section on the MCAT for those of you who are not familiar with it. Mostly physics, content, passages, and timing. Any tips? So I'm going to answer you the general question, and then if you have more specific questions, please feel free to reach out at mcatboss.com. The general answer is you want to do enough practice problems to figure out whether you're missing stuff because of content gaps, like, oh snap, I didn't know that thing, and what you're missing because you're doing something wrong, like misinterpreting the question or just not being able to execute on something like a calculation after you get the correct equation identified. All right. Awesome. Let me see here. All right. We got another burst of questions here. Yes, it's good. I assume you're talking about your GPA. That's great. Does volunteering count as clinical hours? So it totally depends on the type of volunteering that you're talking about. Let me double check the other stream here real quick, guys. Give me one quick second. You'll have to tell me kind of, if you're looking for a more specific answer, you may have to tell me a little bit more specifically what you are volunteering with. It is important to keep in mind that the volunteering that a lot of people do, where they are volunteering at like a soup kitchen or like a building project like Habitat for Humanity, those actually do not qualify. They're not bad, right? Like there are things that you should absolutely do if you are passionate about them, but do not expect them to think that that is clinical hours, because clinical hours, the main thing that they are thinking of with clinical hours is, does this person have enough exposure to clinical medicine to know that they want to practice medicine as a career? And for that reason, you absolutely want to make sure that you are getting actual clinic or hospital hours. I hope that answers your question. All right, let me see here. How hard is it realistically for direct admissions today from undergrad to med school? So the answer is 42%. It sounds like a joke, right? 42. The actual answer is about 42% of students who apply with an MCAT score and some kind of a GPA, about 42% of people matriculate. Now, the numbers are actually probably higher if you were to go back and not just include the MD numbers, but the DO numbers as well. Because keep in mind, there's more than one path to getting into med school. There's more than one path to becoming a doctor. And specifically within the MD track, though, it's about 42%. Cool, great advice. Thank you. Awesome. Happy to help. Now, the numbers, just for one more comment on the numbers real quick. The numbers are going to look higher or lower depending on your GPA. If you have a really stellar GPA, like you have a 4.0 and you score in the top couple percentile on the MCAT, you can potentially have like above a 75% chance of getting in. You still have to interview, but you can have a really high chance. All right, we have another one that says, how do you think I can get a chance? I'm 25 and it's my third year in college after 4 years of gap years. So it really depends on the specifics of what was driving that. Thank you guys for all the likes. Really appreciate it. It really depends on the specifics of what was driving that. If there's a lot of like GPA dips or something else that would give them reason for concern, it is entirely possible that would be concerning to them. If there's some sort of extenuating personal circumstance, like an ill family member or something like that, then those are the kinds of things you should keep in mind, and potentially also plan on talking with them about those things when you apply. All right, let me see here. All right, we have a comment. Please tell me about the stress of med school. So stressed about my application. Is your comment more relating to being stressed about getting into med school, or the managing the stress of keeping up with the pace of med school once you're actually in? Please feel free to kind of let me know what the question is referring to. Another question from someone. Do you have all the pre-med courses done before you took the MCAT? So I had all of the prerequisite courses. I didn't have any of them taken when I first sort of decided to get onto this path, because I was a math major, except for the ones that I had to have for my physics minor. So I had taken physics and some gen chem. So I had to go back and take additional courses in biology and in like biochemistry. And if I remember correctly, I think biochemistry I definitely did not have before I took the MCAT. Now you can learn enough biochemistry to do great on the MCAT just from studying for the MCAT, because they don't test a whole ton of advanced biochemistry. Other than that, though, do try as best as you can to have most of those done. Thank you guys so much for all of the questions. Was it worth it for the money? You'll have to let me know what you're referring to. Hey, I've been plateauing real bad. 126, 122, 126, 124. Recent LTS usually score around 127 PS. Please feel free to reach out at mcatboss.com and set up a session with me, because there's some really specific stuff that people tend to get wrong when they're hitting plateaus. A lot of times it's being driven by an insufficiently detailed approach to their practice questions, as well as some very severely hindering timing habits. The most concerning thing about the score breakdown that you mentioned here, though, is going to be the cars section. This was one of my 100th percentile sections. I wanted to make sure that I had a really, really strong score in this section, in part because I knew that I was coming from a math major, and so for me it was really important to knock that section out of the park. I do think I'm one of the best MCAT cars tutors, especially in the country, because I'm extremely detailed about teaching how that section works, how to read quickly, where to break your time up, and how they actually write the misleading questions and the very misleading answer choices. There's a lot of highly specific language tricks that they use. So please feel free to let me know if I can help you out there. Hi, I go to a T20 school, but my GPA is low-key a little low. What does this mean for my app? So Brian, there's a chart. If you Google the MCAT GPA chart grid, you'll see a blue table, and it'll actually give you a ballpark of what kind of numbers you need to be pulling off in order to actually have a competitive percent of admissions. The thing to keep in mind, the number to keep in mind, is that around 40 to 42% of applicants get in. So you want to ballpark your MCAT goals to be in a range that gives you somewhere around that 40% mark. Is a high 3.6 GPA a red flag for med school applications? No, 3.6. So in fact, while we're chatting about this, let me actually go ahead and pull up my chart here. So MCAT scoring chart. And we'll take a look at this right now. All right, so the numbers for MCAT scoring, the numbers for your, my system is, we're running right up against the top of the bandwidth here. Okay, so a 3.59 to 3. So you're kind of a 3.6 is right in between two of the brackets. The two brackets that include that like 3.4 to 3.8 range, though, if a person scores, say, a 508, which is kind of like a good but not insanely high MCAT score, the likelihood of admission in the last couple of years is between 33 and 40%. So keep that in mind. That would basically mean that if you can crack that like 510 mark on the MCAT, you pretty much have the same statistical chance as everybody else. All right, next one says, have you been to med school or been part of a med school admissions committee? Have I been to med school? So I'm a fourth year MD student right now. I'm not on an official med school admissions committee, so I cannot in any way, shape, or form actually influence anybody's probability of getting in other than helping them actually knock out a killer good score on the MCAT. All right. Thank you guys for the questions. Wow. Great burst of questions here, guys. Thank you so much. Well, let me see where we were. Somebody says, don't go to med school. The system is broken. That's a perfectly valid personal opinion. Everybody is completely entitled to kind of, analyze and assess the medical education and the medical provider landscape and decide if it is right for them. It is definitely not a light jog in the park. It is both a marathon and a sprint at the same time. How many years after med school do people usually pay off their loans? There is, I believe, some published information on this. I don't know what the actual numbers are. It also depends on the path you take and the type of school you take. If you're in a state school, you're sometimes able to get tuition in the like maybe 20 something thousand range. If you are at a private school or a private for profit like DO school, you might be paying upwards of $50,000 to $60,000 a year. So it's something to keep, definitely something to keep in mind. Got a 528 on MCAT at Harvard Med School. Cool, great. That's great numbers. Usually 10 to 15. I believe they're answering about the number of years most people pay off their med school loans. Yes, I'm a psych major pivoting out. Did you have to take gap years? So yes, I had gap years already built in because I had a different career. And then I also made sure that because I had gaps, because I had a career, because I was coming from a different major, a very different career, and because I wanted to have an option about where I lived, and I wanted to get the interview invites at the medical schools that I was applying to, I made sure my MCAT score was super, super high. And I didn't have like a first practice exam, 100th percentile score kind of thing, right? To get close to the 100th percentile on my official exam, I had to literally figure out how the system worked, how the test worked. That's what I teach on MCAT Boss. If I can help any of you guys out, let me know. But there is a very good argument to make that if you have taken gap years, you have even more incentive than everybody else to absolutely knock the MCAT out. I heard a kid became a doctor. There have been some very young people to get admitted to med school, if you think you're going to pull up and be sitting in a chair next to a bunch of 15-year-olds at med school, that is not the case though. In fact, if anything, it seems like more and more people are feeling empowered as career changers, as midlifers, as people who realize they want to do something with their life that is not the career that they were in, and medicine for them sounds like an attractive option. And more people seem to be opening up the door to med school later in life. And so if that is something that you're considering, feel free to let me know. I am in my 30s. I did a very non-traditional route, and I have classmates who are 20 years older than me in med school. All right. Thoughts on RN to MD? Hey, as long as you are excited about the change in the career role, and as long as you're excited about the extra academic pressure of the MD education, that is absolutely a fantastic option. I have a number of classmates who were RNs. They realized they love medicine, they love the hospital setting, they love even sometimes a specific field of medicine, but they wanted to be playing the role of the doctor and not the role of the nurse, and then they got themselves into med school. All right, guys. Okay. Oh my goodness. I think we actually answered. Oh, there's another one. Okay. Current MS1. Hey, congratulations. That's awesome. As an MS4, what study strategies did you use from pre-med that helped you succeed? You know, the biggest thing I would say is that the pace of med school was really fast. The amount of memorization you have to do during preclinical years, your first 2 years of med school, is significant. And it is so much more than you are going to be used to from even a difficult major in undergrad, that I think pretty much everybody had to really escalate their studies. A whole lot of my classmates were in, if they weren't in a gross anatomy lab or a lecture hall, they were studying sometimes 6, 8, 10 hours a day. For me, I had to do a lot of studying. I had a lot of driving during preclinical years, and I had to do a lot of sort of listening to and catching up on lectures over audio. And so you guys are really lucky, because the technology now to have things like AI reading your lecture notes to you, or even listening to a lecture and making lecture notes, or even generating questions from the content, is so high. I really think it's quite exciting time to be entering medical education because of the amount of extra sort of tools that you have at your disposal. What extracurriculars did you do before med school? All right, so I did a lot of stuff that was counted as extracurriculars, and because I had a career in math, because I had a career in like media and stuff, some of those things came up in my med school interview as like things that they wanted to discuss under the sort of banner of extracurriculars. For volunteering specifically, because I didn't start off as a pre-med, I made sure to volunteer, and of course, it's not really volunteering, it's shadowing, right? I made sure to shadow at a couple of clinics that serve patient populations that were kind of the patient population that I care about a lot, because I come from, a city background, and I was interested in a city population. And that again became a good talking point when those topics came up in the process of the med school interview. And also it's really helpful when you can chat about that in your application, because they will ask you stuff like that as well. All right, guys, thank you so much for all the questions. We're only going to be on here probably about 5 more minutes. So if you have any other questions, please do feel free to drop those questions here. All right, let me see. How do you feel about going to school for anesthesia assistants? Now, are you asking about, I assume you're asking about like something like a CRNA role. If you are referring to something else, please do feel free to let me know. But I assume that you are referring to, okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, guys, let me see here. We're going to wrap up in just a couple minutes here. But yes, awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. Yes. Thank you guys. Though I do think that the additional anesthesia routes I think are awesome. I have spoken with a number of colleagues in the hospital who are in these various anesthesia roles. And the thing to keep in mind is if you feel like you have sufficient exposure to that role in the hospital that you can make an informed career decision about it, that's going to be the main thing that I think you should be thinking about. The path length, how long does this school route or certification route or training route take? And then the obvious economic incentive, how well does it pay? How good is it for a mix of family time and work-life balance? And then do volunteer or shadow somebody who has that role in order to have a realistic metric for how that role is in the hospital. Okay. All right. Let me see. Got to burst more. Okay, we're going to be on 4 more minutes, guys. Let's see here. I want to have an MCAT study schedule. Do you sell it anywhere? So if you're looking for a schedule, what I recommend, I really strongly recommend this. And to any of you who are like about to go down this long path of MCAT prep, I want to be super, super crystal clear with this. Anybody who sells you a just MCAT study schedule are doing you a disfavor. I have been tutoring the MCAT over 11 years and they're doing you a disfavor. What I strongly recommend is working with somebody who teaches a problem-based approach and then setting up, you can even set up one session and just talk through what your own personal objective and timeline is, and let somebody like me, it can be me or somebody else, but I specifically teach a problem-based approach that specifically identifies your own content gaps. This is why it's not like anything else out there when it comes to just these sort of cookie cutter, broad Excel downloads or PDF downloads where it's just like, here's a standard template. You do not have the gaps that any other student has anywhere on earth. You should not just copy the study plan of any other student anywhere on earth. So I really recommend we can scale it. It can be anywhere from like 100 days to 50 days. It can be 150 days, whatever scale you want, but work with somebody who can teach you how to identify your content gaps and then do a problem-based approach. Content calendars are a thing from the 1990s. They're not effective. All right. Okay. Gotta burst more. We're on here 3 more minutes, guys. Thank you. What is the hardest class you ever took that gives you nightmares? Oh yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. Feel free to either drop me a contact form or just go to mcatboss.com. I do give a pretty big discount if people find me through TikTok or through YouTube Live. Just mention that you worked with Matt on the live and you want to go ahead and get more info. So the hardest class I ever took. So the hardest prerequisite for the MCAT I took, I would say, just because of the amount of just brute force memorization, would probably be something like biochemistry, but it's also one of the most fascinating and probably the most relevant one for med school. I really enjoyed physics. Ended up doing a physics minor, so going all the way through like relativity. And because it was a math major, I thought that was just enjoyable. That was awesome. And then the other class I would say it has nothing to do with the medical route at all is, and if my professor would see me, he would laugh about this, but I really enjoyed the math of like calculus, and I enjoyed the math, the theoretical math courses. But there's one branch of math that I just never got really good at, and that is discrete mathematics. So, if my discrete mathematics professor is out there wondering why I still didn't solve that bridge spanning problem, I apologize. And then the hardest class in med school, I'm not sure. It would probably just end up getting lumped into like one of the first semester courses, just because it's so fast and everything's happening at the same time and you have so many tests back to back to back to back. All right, guys. Okay. I do believe we got through everybody's questions. Thank you so much again. As we are signing out here, I just want to kind of remind everybody, the general advice will always stay the same. Start studying for the MCAT earlier than you think you need to. Don't waste your time on doing hundreds of hours of content videos if you're not doing practice problems. Start getting busy with the practice problems. If you need somebody to guide you through how you actually use a QBank to identify your content gaps and correct your process, your miscalculations, anything like that, there is a method to the madness to give yourself that structure. So if I can help any of you out, just drop me a line at mcatboss.com or drop me a line on the contact form here. And we'll wrap it up with this last question from Noor. What is the best format of studying practice tests or videos? And hands down, I want to be clear, I don't mean practice tests. Save those till you're a couple months away from your exam. If you want to do one up front just to get an idea of what the MCAT's like, there's nothing wrong with that. But what you need to get is a MCAT QBank. It is the way that you need to train yourself to get used to the way that the MCAT asks questions. If you have not done that, you have not prepared for the MCAT. If you have made a 4.0, even if you have gone all the way through getting a PhD in a biomedical field, you are still not studied up for the MCAT if you have not done an MCAT QBank. So jump on one. If you need help using it, let me know. Thank you guys so much for the participation. Everybody was keeping it hopping and keeping it busy tonight. Appreciate you all. And don't forget to follow, leave a comment if you ever have a question on any of my daily questions that I post for practicing the MCAT. And if you're in the application cycle, last but not least, if you are in the application cycle and you need help on the interview prep, let me know. All right. Talk to you.